Good morning, Mr. Williams.
Good morning, Chief Justice.
Are you well?
I'm well. Good morning, Commissioners.
Yes. You look like a relaxed person, so let me just go straight to the point. Please tell us why you believe you're the right person for this position and what work or life experiences have prepared you for this responsibility.
Chief Justice, I at this stage must say that I have not been involved in litigation per se.
Just bring it closer to you so that everybody can hear you. You can even pull the whole gadget closer.
Thank you. Yeah. So, but my experience politically involved me in various spheres of election processes. I have been at some stage a party agent. Then I have been an observer on behalf of the party. And then later I have been an independent observer. So I have been quite involved, if I can call it, within the engine of the operations of elections. That's basically my experience.
Yes. And maybe before you are even asked which party?
The ANC.
Yes. Proceed.
I have been then quite involved also on the grassroots level with campaigning, and I have been in this process from a young age up until a certain stage when I started practicing as an attorney, and I had to withdraw myself at some stage after my office established itself in Mossel Bay and in George.
Is it fair to assume that you familiarized yourself with the legislative framework that governs the Electoral Court and related processes?
That is correct, yeah. And as a party agent also, you have to know certain stipulations and have to conduct yourself accordingly. So it gave me some kind of practical insight in the application of the Act. Yes. And its stipulations.
Thank you very much. Justice Mba?
Good morning, Mr. Williams.
Good morning, Justice.
Yes. I must thank you for having made yourself available for this position as the chairperson of this court.
Thank you.
I've gone through your CV, and I see amongst the other things you've done is to be a commissioner at the Small Claims Court.
That is correct, yeah.
Yes, and you are also a legal advisor at the D. Almeida Advice Office. Have you had to make rulings, adjudicative rulings, in the course of your activities?
Specifically in respect of those two examples that you referred to?
Yes.
In the Small Claims Court, I had to make rulings.
Yes.
And I have served the Small Claims Court for a considerable time, up until I have been appointed as an acting magistrate in Bloemfontein.
Yes.
So I've done that on a regular basis, and probably twice or once per month.
Yes.
Where we sat in George, usually after hours, and I sit with either an assistant or I sit alone. So I had to adjudicate a lot of matters and the intention, obviously, of the small claims court is to make justice more accessible to indigent persons specifically because of the small amounts and also the type of claims which one would rather have adjudicated in a more informal way so that they can feel more personalized in the situation. In respect of the Almeida Civic, I have the Almeida Civic is a community organization in Mossel Bay, and they had an office in Mossel Bay, and they provided free services, socio-economic, political, general advice, and during my student years, I have been involved during holidays. I have been involved in the civic organization, and later with my admission as an attorney, I then also provided my services to the Almeida Civic on a periodical basis in order to assist with the inquiries and the problems experienced by the community in Mossel Bay and the surrounding areas.
I see. In your application, I see you've applied to be a judge of the Electoral Court.
That's correct.
Yes. And in fact, one question is asked, what would happen to your practice? And you said that if you are appointed, you would sell your practice. But now, the position advertised is for a non-judge member of the court. Are you aware of that?
Yeah,
Are you aware of that?
of the non-judge member.
Yeah, that's the position that you are being interviewed for here.
Okay. Yeah.
No, but I mean, were you aware of that?
Yeah.
Okay. So now, this court does not sit continuously in the ordinary sense, like an ordinary high court. It only sits as and when there are cases.
That's correct.
Yeah. Now, a non-judge member cannot be appointed as a permanent member the same way as a judge would. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on. You've said you are aware of the legislation applicable to the Electoral Court. Please don't nod.
Yes, correct.
Yes. Are you aware of the rules that apply to the Electoral Court?
I have acquainted myself with the specific rules
Yes.
which was issued in terms of the Act of the Electoral Court.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure you will agree with me that elections and their disputes, by their nature, they're quite urgent.
That's correct, yeah.
Yes. So would you be available to come and sit as and when you are required, when the court has to be convened?
On an urgent basis,
Yes.
that should be my availability, yes.
Thank you, Chief Justice. I have nothing further.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Msomi?
Thank you, Chief Justice. I'm going to be fair to you and ask you the questions that I posed to a candidate before you. What do you attribute the lower voter turnout to? I mean, if you look at the fact that in 1999, we probably had the highest voter turnout of registered voters at about 89%. 20 years later, we went down to about 65 of the registered voters.
May
What do
I
you-
interrupt you, Commissioner Msomi? Isn't it difficult for, and possibly not very helpful for a person like him to venture an answer to a question like that? It arguably takes much more to get a semblance of certainty in relation to what's going on than whatever any of us here might think the problem is. I'm not stopping you, I'm just saying that it may not be easy.
I appreciate the Chief Justice, but I would have imagined we are still very much called a very young democracy. So for me, just as an ordinary citizen, it really worries me that 20 years later, people are showing a disinterest in voting, a right that was so fought hard for. That is why I'm asking a candidate who's availing himself to sit on the Electoral Court to share his understanding of the dynamics of our country around electoral systems, the electoral regime, and so on.
Commissioner Malema?
CJ, I was also worried earlier about the intervention because that which Commissioner Musomi is asking is a general question to be posed to a person who's interested in a position that deals with elections. It's a general question. Ordinarily, if you are availing yourself to be a judge in the electoral court, you will have, followed or developed some interest in election. But if they don't want to answer it, it's fair, it's fine. But I'm also interested to hear, do they know that there's some form of a decline and they have an opinion on it, or if they don't have it, that's okay, we can pass the report on which the judge says he has not read. I have not read myself as well. And if you ask that question, the person didn't say, I didn't read it, in the deliberation, he can't use that to pin that candidate down because it has got nothing to do with suitability. I will be worried if he was using that in the deliberation. But to get a general sense of whether you know what's happening in election in South Africa, for me, it's a point of interest.
I said to him he may proceed. I was just cautioning that it may require much more to get something helpful, but I never stopped him from proceeding with it.
Yeah, okay. To respond to the question, I think one of the problems is that people had certain expectations. We all had at the rise of the South African democracy. And during the time and with the development of the democracy over the years, certain things happened. Certain mistakes were made. And I think that more and more people, after having voted a second time or a third time, realize that unfortunately the expectations is not realized and they become disgruntled with the system, and most of them became disillusioned with elections. And that basically, according to me, might be one of the factors. I don't say it's the only factor, but it might be one of the factors.
Would that call for a current electoral reform, perhaps, to encourage more people? I mean, there's always a question about what some people refer to as the failure of individual MPs to account because they go to parliament representing political parties rather than their constituencies. Is that perhaps?
No, I wouldn't say it calls for an overhaul. I say that our Constitution is one of the best legal instruments in the world. And if we look at the Bill of Rights, if we look at each and every stipulation, we have this type of legalistic promises to the people of South Africa. But there is some kind of misdirection in respect of the application of those rights. We tend to concentrate more on the vertical application of those rights, instead of keeping in mind that we also bear the obligation of the horizontal application of those rights. And what I mean by that basically is that we, and a few weeks ago, one accused person appeared before me, and there was an application, and there was a delay, and there was a lot of objections, and I had to apply my mind in respect of his right to a speedy trial and his right to due administrative action. And I told him that this court, that I am today here, and I'm giving life to your rights, your constitutional rights. I as a person, I as a court. But the same applies to you. You should take the responsibility. And if you go out here, give life to the constitutional rights of your brother and your sister.
I'm limited to 2 questions. Thank you, CJ.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Singh?
Thank you, Chief Justice. Good morning, Mr. Williams.
Good morning, Mr. Singh.
My first question was going to center around what are you doing currently? Because when I look at your questionnaire under item 6, you stop at 31 October 2017, where you say acting magistrate, but later on you say 1st June 2018 to date you are acting. Are you currently an acting magistrate, and where?
I am currently an acting magistrate. I am serve at Bartow Community Court in Bloemfontein.
Appointed by the DOJ?
Appointed by the Minister.
Thanks. Second question relates to your political affiliation. You state on page 5 in black that you're a member of the UDF, and until quite recently, because 10 years ago is quite recent, ANC MSB branch secretary and deputy chairperson. And I'd just like to know that if you are appointed, do you think we can consider you to be an impartial person when you sit in judgment there at the highest court, the Electoral Court?
Well, I have had certain experiences politically, and at some stage I realized that in order to play the role which I feel is correct in my situation, I had to divorce myself from involvement in any political party or in any political organization or activities. And all those involvements and experiences helped me. It formed me. But to be a judge or to be a presiding officer or a magistrate, I need to take away all the convictions, take away all the delictions which one might have, because that is essentially why a judge is a judge. There is an American jurist, Judge Cardozo, who said that each and every judge, each and every person has personal convictions, has deeply embedded beliefs, has deeply embedded principles. However, the difference is that that person elevate himself to a position where those are shielded away from justice and from being impartial.
Thank you, Chief Justice. I got my answers.
Thank you so much, sir. Commissioner Nyambi?
Thank you, CJ. Morning, Mr. Williams.
Good morning.
I have just one question. In dealing with the question of Judge Mba, you said you will close your practice whilst you claim to be aware that this is not a full-time position. Probably if you can explain the reason that will make you to sell or close your practice once you're appointed to a position that is not permanent.
What I neglected actually to say is that I have looked at my at the questionnaire, and what I actually saw in there afterwards, that is not what it's supposed actually to say, in light of the non-permanency. So that should not be read into it's a mistake.
Now, because you are aware that it's not a permanent position, are you still available to serve in that non-permanent position?
That's correct, yeah.
Thank you, CJ.
Thank you so much, Honorable Nyambi. Commissioner Dodovu?
Yeah, thank you very much once more, CJ. Mr. Williams, in the main, the Electoral Court's function is to review the procedural fairness of the decisions of the IEC. It is clear that you are familiar with the principles of natural justice, especially the maxim audi alteram petem rule. Do you?
Yeah.
In this particular instance, how will it apply in the context of the Electoral Court, given the work and the function of the Electoral Court?
Well, because of the urgency of the matters which is before the Electoral Court, it is very short time for postponement or for applicants or respondents to submit the papers. However, at the discretion of the judge, he should always adhere to the fact that even though it is urgent, the rule of partem, the alteram partem should be applied at all times. And that also helps in order to put the presiding officer or the judge in a position to make a clear and concise decision in respect of the matter before him, because that is essential in order for a presiding officer or the judge to fairly and at the benefit of all the parties before him come to an equitable decision. So even though it is of an urgent nature, the fact that another person should be given the right to answer should not be neglected or disregarded. It is essential.
Thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you so much, Honorable Dodovu. Commissioner Moiman?
Good morning.
Good morning.
What is your view in the expectation by the IEC that aspirant voters in rural villages and informal settlement in registering as voters are expected to have formal addresses in terms of street names and numbers and stand numbers? Doesn't this affect their right to register as voters?
It does.
Thank you.
It does. My experience with Barto in Bloemfontein is that at many occasions, people appear before me and they are arrested, and the question of bail is coming up. And there is one specific area which I think is called Palindaba. And Palindaba is an area where, as they call it in Bloemfontein, shacks had been built on certain lots. No numbers has been allocated. And those people, unfortunately, in those circumstances, cannot prove any address. They cannot prove any ownership of the property. However, I should decide whether that person is entitled specifically also to bail as any other person. And the fact that he does not have a registered address cannot really prejudice his chances to get bail. The process I followed usually is to ask an investigating officer to either accompany the accused to the specific address, acquaint himself with the place of stay, and then advise me. The same situation in respect of the electoral processes. We have vast numbers of people who are just staying, and it's not because of their own doing, but it's because of circumstances. And I am of the opinion that it would be immensely unfair if those people's right to vote is taken away purely because of the fact that they cannot prove their address or they don't have a property registered in their names.
Thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you so much, sir. Minister?
Good morning, Mr. Williams.
Good morning, Mr. Minister.
In your experience of the electoral system and with regard to the last elections, teething challenges of queues, running out of ballots, and also the huge number of the political parties that had registered, do you think an electronic voting system could be a solution for our country?
That is probably in what direction we are going, and it might help, especially with the dilemma which the previous commissioner has highlighted. Because once we get to that point, we can use identification purposes purely the fingerprint and no specific addresses. And that might probably help, and also with people who are in remote areas can be accommodated to partake in this process. So at this stage, it is a vast task, but I am of the opinion at some stage, this might be the solution to our situation in South Africa.
Except your involvement with the IEC in terms of your party agent and other, have you been involved in an electoral process for any other thing in your community, as Stockfell, school governing body, to help them conduct elections, or if there's a dispute in that, or an NGO, or any other thing? And what will you say that experience, if you're involved, could help you if you are a judge of the electoral court?
Well, at some stage, I have been the regional representative in the Southern Cape. It is basically from Plettenberg Bay, Knysna, George, Oudtshoorn, then Mossel Bay, and up to Riversdale and Albertina. And I had to be available for disputes arising during the election day. And
No. That part I did understand, that you're involved with the Electoral Commission and the national elections. I want to know if you're involved in any other elections outside the national or local government elections. For example, elections in a school governing body to help the school governing body to conduct elections, or a church, or any other form of elections that you might have helped with. And if you were, do you think that experience could help you if you become a judge of the Electoral Court?
In my capacity as a registrar of the Anglican Diocese in George, I am on a continuous basis involved in election processes. I have been involved in the last election process with the Archbishop for the election of the diocesan bishop, that is for the Diocese of George. And I am involved in the election of the trust board, which is part of the diocese, and the finance board. So I have been involved on a continuous basis in election processes.
Think that kind of experience could help if you become an electoral judge, which is different to the national and local government elections?
Yeah, those experiences helps in a way that I have to, with the counting officers, sift through all the processes. I have to look at whether the specific votes are qualified, disqualified, and those give me an insight, basically in the practical process on the ground in respect of election processes in South Africa. And as a judge, I will have in the back of my mind knowledge and some kind of practical experience which I bring to the position.
Thank you.
Commissioner Mpofu?
Thank you, CJ. Good morning.
Good morning, Advocate.
Thank you. Yes, I'm particularly impressed by your willingness to assist as a party agent. Yes, but so is this something that you do often? Did you assist in the last election, for example?
No.
Training of other party agents. When did you last do it?
That was probably 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago.
Okay. No, good. Now, when it comes to the electoral system, as you know, one of the admirable things about any electoral system, and they like saying this in America, that even the child of a farm worker can become the president. So in theory, anybody should be able to stand for office. But in our country, because of the political party system, you have to pay a registration fee, and then on top of that, you have to pay deposit in order to contest. And the total of that, if you want to contest nationally, can come to more than 600,000 rand. Do you think that is a good thing, or is it compatible with the Section 19 of the Constitution, which allows for every citizen to stand for political office, or does it limit the ability of ordinary people to contest for political participation, and maybe even encourage the current situation where money plays the most important role in elections? You need about 1 billion apparently these days in order to be able to.
Yeah, in respect of the monetary requirement in order to stand as a candidate, I am of the opinion that it is inevitable, though it places some kind of financial pressure on a candidate. It also indicates the capacity of a candidate not only to stand for elections, but also to make an effort personally to qualify. That is basic requirements which I feel should be put in place, and it is not a compromise of Section 19 of the Constitution.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Nkosi Thomas.
Thank you, Chief Justice, and good morning, Mr. Williams.
Good morning.
Since 1994, our courts have developed jurisprudence on electoral law. From the days of August in 1999, I think it was, and to the Cape Party just last year by the SCA. Now, I take it you've worked through that body of authority. Which particular case stands out for you, and why?
The case which basically stands out for me pertains to to any person who can approach and register for elections directly in competition, in a personal capacity, in competition with political parties. In the American system, we have the allowance of private persons who can contest elections in a private capacity for president. Now, I think that should still be developed in South Africa. And if a person is in a position where he can contest those type of elections, it should be allowed, because that will broaden and open up the constitutional democracy of South Africa.
Yeah, maybe I didn't make myself clear. I wasn't asking about the electoral system, how the South African electoral system perhaps compares to that of the United States of America. My question is the jurisprudence as we have it, as we have developed it to date. In other words, the cases.
Well, okay.
Yes, and I assumed that you would have worked through them just to give yourself a working understanding of the jurisprudence as it stands currently. And the question is, which of those cases stands out for you and why that is so?
If I can just...
You may, please. Perhaps I should just ask a direct question. Have you taken the time to work through the cases?
Yeah, I did. I have worked and read through all the cases. The specific one which actually stood out for me, and this was a judgment by the presiding officer, Judge Shongwe, dated 2014. It was the MEC governance, MEC cooperative governance, human settlements and traditional affairs, Northern Cape, versus the IEC and the Mayor Danny Jonas, and specifically, it was about a person becoming a member of a party, and how do you interpret specifically a person being listed as a nominee on behalf of a party vis-a-vis his voluntary acceptance of membership, which is for me a quite interesting and a useful development of the jurisprudence.
Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief Justice.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Nkosi Thomas. Commissioner Fourie?
Good morning, Mr. Williams.
Good morning, Commissioner.
I just need to understand something. You have an attorney's practice in George.
That's correct, yeah.
I assume you're a sole practitioner.
Yeah.
Now, you've acted as a magistrate in 2017 from February till the end of October. And somewhere I've seen, and you've also indicated that you're currently acting as a magistrate in Bloemfontein.
That's correct, yeah.
Somewhere I've seen that is since June of 2018.
Yeah.
So that is now more than a year.
That's correct.
So just explain to me, if you're acting as a magistrate and now lately in Bloemfontein, what happens to your practice in George?
Well,
do you lock the doors and
no.
Go and act? And
no.
What do you do? Because I don't understand how you can keep a practice going under these circumstances.
Yeah, no, the requirements of the LPC, it was previously the Law Society, is that when you accept an acting position, you should make sure that a locum is then appointed. I have a professional assistant that is, previously I had 2 professional assistants, but now I have 1, who is operating the office and who is practicing as an attorney.
So is there a professional assistant?
That's correct, yeah.
In your office every day during office hours, attending to whatever current matters you may have?
That's correct, yeah.
And how do you oversee that?
Well, basically, the requirement is that he should oversee the office, which is being done, and on a periodical basis, I will also attend and see, but primarily, the authority is then given to him.
But you are the principal.
That's correct, yeah.
And if things go wrong, you are in trouble.
Yeah, but things haven't gone wrong.
I repeat my question, how do you oversee your practice as being the principal of that practice?
Well, what I can say is with the technology and with how we can operate today, it is not so difficult to make sure that the basic things are complied with. I remain at the end responsible. However, I have certain measures in place in order to make sure that nothing will go wrong.
I can carry on for long, but I'll leave it there, Mr. Williams. Thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Fourie. Commissioner Malema?
Thank you, CJ. Do I understand you to be saying there is a provision in our law that requires of people to pay money in order to register for political parties?
No.
There is no such law, isn't it?
No.
Yes, thank you.
Commissioner Sigogo?
Thank you, Chief Justice. Good morning, Mr. Williams.
Good morning.
I only came in as a follow-up on the question by Commissioner Fourie, because I think what he wants you to articulate on is in respect of the control of the trust accounts of the practice. In your absence, who makes sure that the monies of your clients and in extension of members of public are safe?
Well, there is still certain measures, and I have some kind of direct control over that. it is possible with the technology. There is an auditor who is also monitoring, and also then there is a private banker who makes sure that everything happening is according to the stipulations or it requires my authority. So that is basically the safety measures put in place.
So you are not responsible in writing up your accounting books on monthly basis and balancing them every 2 months because you are away and you are the acting magistrate. Is that what you are telling us? And you have relegated that function to someone else?
No. I remain responsible. I still monitor everything and I still do everything in respect of the trust account.
Thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Sigogo. Mr. Williams, you're excused, sir. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.